Which six players have the best fantasy football matchup for Super NFL Wildcard Playoff Weekend? We break down why Travis Etienne and Jalen Hurts, among others, are must-plays on this edition of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com. My co-host, Michelle Majuk of NFL.com, is off today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the number one sports podcast network. And we do have some games. They're different games, but we do want to get into them this week. And we will go deeper on our best quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end plays based on analysis, and get you ready for what you want to do in DFS with our FanDuel and Price picks. That's all coming this week. But a little appetizer here to get you going and wanting to get you in on the action here. How you're playing it, if you're doing a mini league here for the playoffs, or you can play in DFS, looking round by round, or overall, want to help you play the right players and get into the action here. And of course, there's also prop betting you can look at. You can also look at different ways to play DFS this week too. You can explore that with some fantasy regular season options, not as available to you, but you can still play in a much different way. So I'm going to break down the 6 players that you want to look at most in your fantasy lineups, however you're playing this week, based on the great matchups. Now, a lot of the bad defenses, they're out of the playoffs. The really bad teams, but there's still some teams you can exploit. And let's start with the San Francisco 49ers. They're beat up defensively. They are going to Philadelphia. Now, Jalen Hurts has been under a lot of scrutiny, as well as the play caller, Brian Patullo. They've been questioning their identity. They're not running the ball consistently with Saquon Barkley. They found some of that groove down the stretch. But this matchup is fantastic for quarterbacks. You look at the 49ers, they're beat up everywhere in the back seven. They miss Fred Warner in coverage. Their work against the tight end has been pretty bad in recent weeks, and now that can come to fruition in this game as well. Dallas Goedert has been on a hot streak scoring touchdowns. You also have Grant Calcaterra. He scored last week. So the Eagles are making a point to get the ball to their tight end. Then you look at A.J. Brown. He's probably going to get a matchup against Renardo Green. They do not change their corners, as we saw against the Seahawks. The 49ers keep those guys pretty consistent with where they're covering. So Renardo Green is going to be on A.J. Brown. You have Deommodore Lenoir on Devonta Smith. And we just look at that matchup. It's not as good. Devonta Smith maybe having a little bit of trouble stretching the field. But I love what you get with Brown versus Green this week to exploit that 49ers secondary. That is a weak spot of their team. Plus, they're not getting much of a pass rush without Nick Bosa. So that's a bit of a break as well up front for that Eagles offensive line that may or may not have Lane Johnson out there at right tackle. So all these things are pointing to Jalen Hurts having a nice game in the opener against the 49ers. There should be a lot that he sees open up on the field. It's at home. It's good for Brown downfield. Usually when Brown has a good matchup, the tight ends can work. That usually means good things for Hurts as a passer. Now, as a runner, he can add to that as well. And the 49ers, look, without Warner, they don't have some guy to clean up the same way in the middle of the field. They've also had Tatum Bethune get hurt in the middle, the linebacker as well. He's been in and out of the lineup with injuries. So they're pretty thin in the linebacker core. So that's good for Jalen Hurts if they want to run the ball inside on that team. And the threat of Saquon Barkley is going to keep things at bay here for the 49ers defense, no pun intended. So when we look at that, Jalen Hurts needs to have a big game, and I think he will, to get past this first round. I mean, the matchup is so much better for him at home than it is for Brock Purdy facing that Vic Fangio defense with all those cover guys really playing well of late. But the 49ers just don't have the horses back there to handle what Philadelphia has if they get Brown and Goddard going. And those two alone can help Hurts have a big day, get multiple touchdowns. Hurts should have a decent day running. We also know he's a threat to score on the ground on a shorter touchdown. And we saw the little red zone woes of the Seahawks, but in the end, they were still able to run the ball in key moments for those big plays with Zach Charbonnet. So I really like what Jalen Hurts and this Eagles passing game can do against the 49ers. I think they're going to have to come through. If they stick with a run-heavy game plan, I don't think it's going to bode well for them escaping the first round. But open it up with Jalen Hurts, they will be just fine, and they will advance to the divisional playoffs. Now, another team I also like to advance the divisional playoffs, they're also playing at home. This is the 3-6 game over that you look at in the AFC. This is the Jaguars at home, getting a chance here as slight underdogs. They're 1.5 underdogs to the Bills who are coming in. There are two bad run defenses, really bad run defenses that stick out that are left in the playoffs. One is in the NFC, that's Chicago. But one that's worse, 28th in the league during the regular season. You look around, all the teams that struggled against the run, they're at home. They're not in the playoffs. The Bills are a bit anomalous because they also had the number one rushing attack in the NFL. Coincidentally, the Jaguars have the number one run defense in the NFL. So it's strength on that side with James Cook going against that Jaguars front. But what I really want you to look at is Travis Etienne against the Bills. And the thing about this is Trevor Lawrence and that passing game has to be feared right now. With what they're doing, they've won 8 straight games. They're clicking with all their guys. Parker Washington has a pretty good matchup in the slot. Teron Johnson has struggled there. We know Brenton Strange. And really, now you have Brian Thomas Jr. coming on as like a complementary weapon to Washington and Jacoby Myers. These guys are going to get open. They're going to be able to stretch the field a little bit. That's going to open up the running game as well for Etienne, and he's a good receiver, and they can sometimes struggle with that aspect as well. So Etienne can get a lot of carries in this one now. They're a middle pack rushing team, the Jaguars, but they can turn it on and have some big games, and Etienne in particular has been kind of explosive at times when he puts together his nice games. Usually they're big. They're usually not modest, that he goes off and he has multiple touchdowns, and he's rushing for a dominant level of production. So I think you'll see that again with Etienne. I think everyone's focused on Lawrence in the passing game, but Etienne really has the best matchup. This Jaguars offensive line is playing well. They can push around the Bills there a little bit up front. So that's the second best matchup, really. I like Hurts should, again, pick apart the 49ers. They're just too overmatched with all their injuries. I think their defensive injuries are going to cost them a lot more than their offensive injuries. While with the Bills, they just haven't had the horses all year in the front seven to stop the run, and that's been their bugaboo. I think the Jaguars can also force some turnovers here. That's kind of what they did with Anthony Campanile at defensive coordinator here. So they can force turnover, maybe get some short fields, rushing in. Then Trevor Lawrence, of course, moving the ball at a high level. That should set up Etienne for some goal line work. He's an excellent scorer, we know, in that capacity. So Hurts and Etienne, the two best matchups, two must-play guys, two of the best matchups here individually for NFL fantasy football wildcard weekend. So a lot of good stuff there. We will get into 4 more players who are sitting pretty this week and can make a difference in fantasy and reality for their teams. We'll do that after this quick break. All right, this episode, Locked On Fantasy Football, is brought to you by ZocDoc. Finding a doctor you actually like can feel like discovering a diamond in the rough. You want someone in network nearby with availability, but you also want a doctor who really listens, makes you feel comfortable, explains things clearly, and helps you walk out feeling confident about your next step. Your diamond in the rough doctor awaits and exists. It's finding them, and it's all about finding them easily with ZocDoc. And ZocDoc is a free app and website that helps you find and book high-quality in-network doctors so you can choose someone you really, truly connect with. I love that you can stretch and search for specialty or symptoms and quickly find the right fit for you. The real-time availability feature means you can book instantly, no phone tag, and knowing exactly when you'll be coming. Opponents to this are usually just the snags and the call log, but appointments here usually happen within 24 to 72 hours when you use ZocDoc, and they can even have same-day openings if you need immediate assistance. If needed to book care fast, this is the first place I would go. It just makes the process simple for you. Just go to ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL. Stop putting off those doctor's appointments to find and instantly book a doctor you love today. That's ZocDoc, ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL, ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL. Thanks to ZocDoc for sponsoring this fine message, and I hope you do reach out again. That's only at ZocDoc.com. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is also brought to you by a fun new way to get in on the action. Draft picks positions are set, and so many teams are looking for their franchise QB. Ever wish to become a pro QB, getting drafted first overall by your favorite team? Well, now you can. There's a mobile game just for you. It's called Ultimate QB Football Legend. In this game, you step into the cleats of a number one draft pick quarterback. It's your job to lead your team to greatness, to help turn around a failing franchise and turn it into a dynasty. This is the number one QB career mode game on the mobile app stores, and it introduces the most realistic environment with full career control. Sign contracts, train and upgrade yourself, build chemistry, involve your teammates, give input to your GM on roster moves, play the actual games in 2D, and rise through the ranks to become a pro football legend. You'll deal with the ups and downs of a QB career, from rookie nerves to playoff drama, and every choice shapes your journey. Ultimate QB is totally free to play with no ads and works 100% offline. Perfect for when you want to sneak in a quick game or two on the go. Just head over to ultimate-qb.com. That's ultimate-qb.com, or search Ultimate QB in your app store. We got something special just for you guys. Use the promo code Locked On, all caps, in the game store to get a free boost at the start of your career. That's Ultimate QB Football Legend QB1. It's your legacy. All right, it is time to continue the show here in Locked On Fantasy Football. But before we do that, an important announcement. You probably heard a little bit about our Everyday Club. It gives you access to ad-free episodes. Well, if you're into that a little bit more, you can check out the link there to find out how to become part of the Everyday Club. It's very special. You'll really support the show and get the show to you year-round without ads. So that's fantastic here. If you love what Michelle and I do, this is a great way to stay connected with the show, get some exclusive access and perks there where you'll get more direct link to the fantasy football advice that we give every single weekday all throughout the year. So check it out. Again, there's a link right there to join the Everyday Club in the show notes so you can do to find out more. Again, it's lockedonpodcast.com/everyday. Join the Everyday Club and support Locked On Fantasy Football like never before today. All right, it is time to get into the next wave of matchups that I really like this week. And we'll get, again, into the quarterbacks, running backs, wide receiver, and tight ends a little bit more, the standouts from the rankings. For me, there are two sneaky matchups that you want to look at now. On paper, these two defenses have not given up a lot to wide receivers in passing games, but they each have a weak link. That's the Chargers I'm talking about, and Stefon Diggs lines up in the slot more than half the time here for the Patriots. Now, there's no indication he won't play. He, again, quiet finish to the season, but he was hot before then, a couple 100-yard games. This is a chance for him to get going again. Why? The Chargers are really not good in the slot. That's where they struggle most. If a team has a decent slot receiver, that's where he exploits them. And outside, I think they'll limit maybe the big plays that you might get from Kayshon Boutte and others. But Diggs is a savvy route runner. He can get open. These are the type of guys that have succeeded against the Chargers defense this year. So Tarheeb still is usually the guy that's in the mix of that coverage. He's the weak link there for the Chargers. We know they're very good at safety with Derwin James, and elsewhere in their secondary, they play tough in the scheme of Jesse Minter. But they do have that weakness on the inside, especially covering slot receivers. And Diggs, again, is busy in the slot, and he's a guy that's a technician, can get open, use his hands, get some movement there. And I think you're going to see Drake May, smart quarterback, see that matchup and exploit it plenty here in this game against the Chargers. The Chargers are kind of grindy. They can contain you in the run. They can contain the big plays. Jim Harbaugh is going to have them playing tough. They're on the road in New England on Sunday night. But there's going to be Drake May, and he's been surveying the field and looking at it really well this season. So I really do think that's a special moment here for Drake May, really working with Diggs. He's the veteran. He's got the playoff experience here. You would think he's the guy that shows up, and he's going to be a guy that is trusted. But now you can also get the most favorable matchups with Turtle Muffin. So I can see 100 and a score for Diggs. I think he's going to be heavily involved in the game plan. Josh McDaniels can see it. He's going to attack their weakness. That is their weakness. And, of course, you don't need to tell the Patriots twice to throw the ball in the slot in the playoff game. They've done it playing with Tom Brady with McDaniels. They're going to do it again in Drake May's first playoff game with McDaniels. Now, another guy, he's coming back. So he's had some rest here, which doesn't always hurt. And the Steelers somehow were able to get into the playoffs and win the division without him in the 2-game suspension. They did miss him a lot, though. It's DK Metcalf. And you look at this matchup against the Texans, he's going to avoid Derek Stingley Jr., I should say. He's not going to get that tough matchup. I think where you're going to see him a lot is against Kwame Lassiter. And I should say, and you could say that Lassiter is a guy that is just kind of weak here in terms of, I should say, Kamari Lassiter. Kwame was a little bit of an older relative, but Kamari Lassiter is the guy that he's going to be playing. If he had Kwame, I think he would totally destroy him because he's probably not young enough right now to keep up with the player of DK Metcalf's physique and speed and strengths. Now, you look in the last couple games where teams have had success throwing on the Texans, and that was Riley Leonard last week. What was he doing? He was going bombs away to Alec Pierce, throwing downfield. Then a few weeks ago, you had Jacoby Brissett throw it to Michael Wilson. Now you get DK Metcalf in the same position, kind of, to get him up and open here. So I do quite like the fact that you'll see the Steelers get aggressive. Kamari Lassiter can be burned here downfield, and that's the guy that they have to attack because the Texans are really good everywhere else. The key is Aaron Rodgers going to be able to get the ball out in time to avoid that pass rush. Now, I think he was real paranoid about it when he had Myles Garrett going for the sack record against Cleveland and it hurt. And I think he was a little bit more aggressive there against the Ravens. It finally paid off. He had those nice throws that we saw to Adam Thielen and Pat Freiermuth, even though he missed a wide open shot with Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Where DK Metcalf is not Marquez Valdes-Scantling. When he gets open with his big body and frame, he can go up and get a ball that Valdes-Scantling cannot. So through the red zone, going deep, you can exploit the Texans in certain situations here in the passing game. So Lassiter, again, figures to have the Metcalf matchup for much of the game. I think that's ideally what the Steelers will have. Metcalf is well rested. You think Aaron Rodgers can't wait to get this guy back on the field and throw the ball. You saw Mike Tomlin sharing some enthusiasm for Metcalf returning. So they will grease this wheel a bit here this week. Because, again, he's missed 2 games. They've clearly missed him. And the wide-out drop-off is amazing. They were fortunate to get by there with Thielen and Calvin Austin and some of those other guys making plays. And MVS missed that one. And Pat Freiermuth step up at tight end. But now they have a mismatch creator, a guy that can win one-on-one and change the whole game here for the Steelers. So I like DK Metcalf again. The Steelers need to stay aggressive. And you look at the game plans that we've seen from the others and say we need to go and attack that in the same way with that back end of the defense. Arthur Smith, again, we're trusting him to make this happen and look at that, but they're not going to go down without a big swing here, and DK Metcalf from Aaron Rodgers is going to be a big part of that this week. So those are 2 of the wide receiver matchups I like. There's one more I really like as well, and history has shown it is very good for this particular wide receiver and a tight end. And we've talked about this game before, but it's the tight end that we like on the other side that can make a big difference this week, especially now that he's back healthy. We'll get into that here in our final segment. All right, this episode, Locked On Fantasy Football, is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Fridays already feel different during basketball season. Now FanDuel is making them even better. Every Friday night before the games tip off, FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. Don't forget, it's also a big wildcard weekend, so you can get on there as well and get in the action. Good day to get in the action, period. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame. Limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action starts. Opening the FanDuel app during Happy Hour always brings something new, boost bonuses and surprises. Check the weekly special before tip-off and make a move before the window closes. The timing is perfect, right before the games, right before the weekend starts. And it's adding a little extra energy to Friday night basketball without overthinking. Don't forget about Saturday football, Sunday football, Monday football, all that good stuff. So before tip-off and kickoff, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 Eastern. A little basketball, a little action, a whole lot of Friday energy. And again, don't forget to get in the action here for NFL Super Wildcard Weekend. That's NBA Happy Hour only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, we've talked about 4 matchups we like, and if you missed those, breaking down Jalen Hurts, Travis Etienne, Stefon Diggs, and DK Metcalf. Now, these are two next-tier names. All those guys are pretty big names, as we've seen with their fantasy production and what they've done in the past in big moments. Well, Christian Watson is somebody I'm looking at. He is typically not healthy at this point of the year. So he is healthy. He had the week off there last week. Now you have a chance to really rev it up here. And Christian Watson, really good matchup. Jalen Johnson struggling with downfield coverage. They're going to like having him back. It doesn't matter if it's Jordan Love. Looks like that's the trend to start after missing one game with a concussion and being rested in week 18. He should be back with his big arm to throw to Christian Watson this week, and Watson getting that time off as well. So some guys that are rested that are going to be ready for this game. Metcalf, again, missing 2 games for different reasons, but you have Watson definitely rearing to go against the Bears. The Bears are terrible run defense, but you look at the Packers, they could be contained there a little bit. I think you would sell out a little bit to stop the run, see what Jordan Love can do with the downfield passing. And the Bears do give up quite a bit to wide receivers who have some speed and strength, and that is Christian Watson to a T. He did have a very good first game. He didn't play in the second game against the Bears, so I think he has a big, big impact here in this game. If the Packers are going to win, he's going to have to make some plays there for Jordan Love and or Malik Willis to win the game in Chicago. Again, Watson has speed. He's a tough cover. He's a handful here for Jalen Johnson. And I think the Bears secondary is very good at forcing turnovers, but in terms of just straight up coverage and handling the deep ball, they really struggle. So that really lines up well for Christian Watson with Love to have a sneaky big impact on this game against Chicago. He should be their leading receiver. I mean, just based on his profile, speed, strength, size, all that good stuff. I think he'll post up, open up really well against Jalen Johnson. He can blow by him a few times. Good chance to score a touchdown, good chance to make a long play of more than 20 yards in this game. Now, finally, let's go to our last matchup I like. And this guy has been hurt, and we've looked for him more in the lineup. He's had some struggle games here. He's had to share with Dawson Knox, but it's Dalton Kincaid. The Jaguars do struggle at covering the tight end. It's a big deal that they've had issue with. And you go back to games like Tennessee the first time with Gunnar Helm and Chikakonkwo. They can give it up to multiple tight ends. And the week before they got into week 18 against the Colts, they gave it up to multiple tight ends, Mo Alley Cox there, as well as Tyler Warren. So multiple tight ends, 12 personnel, that kind of look can really work, and the Bills should look at that for sure with Joe Brady, their offensive coordinator. I think that's their best chance of winning this game. Take the game out of the hands of the wide receivers and make it more about Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox coming through and then getting down there and helping to block also against that very tough run defense for the Jaguars. That would open things up. We talked about that with James Cook. So having the 2 tight ends on the field, especially Knox being in line, gives them a little bit more versatility. Kincaid is the best receiver matchup in this game. But Khalil Shakir can also be used, but he's been sporadic. We could see Keon Coleman being inactive. We saw just last week, even when they're kind of playing all backups, Brandon Cooks was ruled inactive for that game against the Jets when they're resting other people. So when we look at it, I think the tight ends are the best way for Josh Allen to move the ball through the air. I think they'll still stick with what got them there. A lot of running here with James Cook, even in a tough matchup, maybe extending that if they can't get Cook going on the ground by throwing to him on shorter passes, getting Ty Johnson involved, all that. But Kincaid has a really special chance here. It was good that he got his feet wet, actually, in week 18 to kind of say, okay, he's healthy. He needed a little bit of that rust off. Now he's got that going here. So I think he'll have a bigger role here. They need Kincaid to come through, and he's a guy that can create some mismatches. The Jaguars have very good safety in Antonio Johnson, but maybe isolate Kincaid on a defensive back that isn't a safety and try to get him in the nickel, use him as a slot receiver. I think there's things that I can do with Kincaid to get him open in this game. So Dalton Kincaid, this also could mean some good things for Dawson Knox if you're digging deeper for a sleeper, some guy that could find the end zone. But these are the matchups I like the most this weekend. The one quarterback love this week is Jalen Hurts. Travis Etienne would be my top running back that I want to get in most lineups. And then that 3 of receivers, Diggs, Metcalf, and Watson, where I'm targeting there. And Dalton Kincaid is really the sneaky tight end play. So maybe these are not the most obvious plays that you can look at. Hurts, of course, for frontline QB, but some of these others you might say, oh, would they really smash in this playoff matchup they have during Wild Card Weekend? Absolutely. So those are 6 best matchups here overall. Now, don't forget, we will look more in depth at the quarterback and tight end plays that you can consider here for essentially week 19, the wild card playoffs, 6 games in action this week. We didn't get to talk about all of them in the show, but definitely we're looking at as well Rams, Panthers. We'll break that down for you, who you can play in all those games, quarterback and tight end, running back, wide receiver, and then come, of course, with FanDuel and DFS price picks of the week for you on Friday. That's setting up the table. And Michelle should be back tomorrow here to bring you all the insight with me. So thanks again for listening to Locked On Fantasy Football, part of the #1 Locked On Podcast Network. We'll see you tomorrow looking at the rankings for Week 19.